knock someone down. It is actually easier to build to break somebody down, to be mean to them, that is to build them up and be nicer to them, because human nature, you know, people, everybody has their anxiety and their phobias, and they're nervous about one thing, and they feel like they're going to fail at every turn. You can feed into that easily and hurt a person, but to make them feel like they can do anything, that feel like that they are important and that they are special, that's not easy. And if you can give somebody that feeling, like you should, there, if it's like the saying of, if you can help a person, you should help a person. It's the same idea. If you can make a person feel good about themselves, you should. I've actually had some creators, and it makes me feel good, that have told me, like, you might not have realized this, but at the time I was at a real low point, and you were there. You were there. You might not realize you were there, but you came to the table, and you talked to me for probably way longer than you had time for, but you did it anyway. And you praised me for everything that I was doing, and you made me feel good about the direction of my career. And like, that helped me. Like that conversation helped me. You don't realize it. And I don't, cause I have those conversations with everybody. So when I walk away, I don't be like, did I do something good here? That's my intention from the jump. I don't try and analyze it, but sometimes it actually does more than I even could have imagined. And I think those people now, like, in an exaggerated sense, would die for me. It's also a very, my favorite movie besides Star Wars is It's a Wonderful Life. And I watch it every Christmas, and it's a very George Bailey thing to me. Like, listen, I'm not the richest guy. I'm not the best looking guy, the best dressed guy, but I will do everything in my power to help somebody if I can, with no expectation of anything in return. Like, that's just not what it is. And every once in a, but sometimes you realize that if you need somebody, by living your life like that, if you need somebody, whether it's in a professional way or in a personal way, like they will jump, they will move heaven and earth to reciprocate. And I've had that experience so many times in my career, and it always makes you feel great. Like, you couldn't imagine some of these people that, like, you call up and like, listen, I need a favor, and people that would every right to tell you to just fuck off, and they're like, anything for you, Mike, anything you need, I will drop everything and I will do it. It's great. It's a great feeling.
It's karma, right? I mean, that's the definition. It's you put out into the universe exactly what you want back.
Yeah, I guess.
And it works, amazingly enough.
It does work. There's also another important component to this relationship thing that I'd like to say. And again, it's not a conscious thing, but and Gabe, we've worked together, so you might know this. I try and lead wherever possible, right? And when I mean lead, it's like, whether something needs to get done, and I could very easily ask somebody else to do it, or very easily, like, okay, you guys go and I'll show up and I'll check it later. I'm more of the guy who gets in front and is like, follow me, and let's do it together. Also, likewise, I like to lead by example. So I feel, by acting in this way, by trying to spread by having this attitude, by trying to spread these values, that people kind of start to do this. They start to, it's almost like a pay it forward thing. Like, Mike made me feel good, I'm going to make the next person feel good. I remember when I needed something and Mike was there, and now somebody is asking me for something, and you know what? I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that for this person. I feel like that I'm helping to set an example for people. And I hope that it does. Like, I try to be that inspiration. And again, it goes back to that Superman thing. Like, he's an inspiration he's a fictional character, but he tries to be an inspiration for his readers. He and and I just try to be a little bit of an embodiment of that if I can, in some small way.
Well, it's interesting, right? And I want to come back to this because I feel like it's a little bit more in the wheelhouse of one of those things that doubles as both altruistic and strategic. But you hit on something a little bit earlier that I wanted to talk a bit more about, and that's the empathy thing.
Mhm.
Being empathic and understanding what other people are going through. It's something that popped into my brain as you were talking, and it people are messy, man,
Mhm.
and artists can be notoriously messy. So
Yes.
in some of these interactions, where do you struggle? Because I'm sure that when someone is presented with someone who has as empathic a heart as you do, even in a professional world, there are walls that come crumbling down. W- Where does it get hard for you? Because a person can only kind of bring in so much of that negativity and still maintain a level of peace about themselves. So, are there times where it's just a little too much and you got to get the hell away from it?
Actually, this COVID era has been very difficult for me. Very difficult for me. Now, again, I have a great relationship with so many of these creators. Um, and I know all their ups and downs and, some of their family dramas and, some of their personal struggles and that, and I know a lot of this stuff. But when we were in this COVID era, I wanted to maintain these relationships and and continue to let people know that I was here and that I cared, even though we weren't seeing each other as much as we or at all, and we weren't talking as much as we used to. So I would be reaching out to people in the beginning, in the first few months of this. I would be reaching out to people and just hey, how are you doing? How are you doing? How are you feeling? You doing okay? Is everybody in your family okay? And it became the same conversation about the spiraling of the world into the abyss, as it were, and it became too much for me. It really did, like, because I was in that same position, right? So if I have a creator friend who's struggling with finances or struggling with a personal relationship, and we get into that conversation, and I can offer them advice and just kind of be there for them. But when the constant conversation of, yeah, I've been stuck in the house for 6 months, and I have all this anxiety related to it, and it was just creating more anxiety for me.
Sure.
Uh, it was very difficult to have that same constant conversation consistently that was so close to my personal anxiety. Um, and I kind of had to step back a little bit, like, and it hurt me in a way to kind of disconnect from folks because it's not in my nature. But this whole thing has been so impactful to all of us. Um, so yeah, that was an example. And I guess, like, when you can empathize with people, that's a great skill to have. It's a very important skill to have for any relationship. But you can empathize with a person who's going through an experience. They're going to give a divorce, for example, and you might have been a person who's had a divorce, or known somebody who had a divorce, or been affected by a divorce. Like, as a child, my parents were divorced, and obviously it affected my childhood. You can empathize in some way, but it's not so raw and so close. The talking about the pandemic was so raw and so close, and that constant conversation just was a little bit too much for me.
Yeah. It's it's an interesting ordeal that we're all going through in that regard because we're all going through it, right? And so it affects us all in the same way. It affects us all in different ways. So it just the affect there is universal.
Right.
Um,
If you wanted
it-
to get to something that was not COVID related, one of the things that I struggle with, and it weighs on me, is like I said, I try and empathize with people, And I literally want a relationship build with everybody. You know, I know their kids, and I know their spouses, and I know their partners, and I know their friends, and you know, and I know I try and, you know, their books, and, you know, their projects. But your brain only has so much capacity, you know, especially when you're dealing with thousands of people. You only have so much. And sometimes I forget, and I feel bad. I feel bad if they're like, you know, I'm like, oh, you know, I don't know. For example, how's your son? And they're like, daughter. I'm like, daughter. That's right. I'm sorry. You know, like,
Mm.
sometimes you forget, and you feel almost sometimes you break that relationship in a small way, because the person on the other end is like, he didn't remember. Like, he didn't remember I had a daughter instead of a son. Uh, but I do my best to try and remember as much as I can. And that's, you know, I struggle with it. It bothers me, but at the same time, I know it's an impossibility to remember it all. It just is.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure. I want to get back to what you talked about earlier about leading, because I think it dovetails nicely into the idea of influencing people, and the the idea of you walking into a situation where it'd be very easy for you just to kind of go with the flow, but you put yourself at the front, and you put yourself in a position where you may draw ire from people in situations like that. Like, people might be mad at you, where you open yourself up to all kinds of slings and arrows in situations like that, but you put yourself there. Is it? And maybe again, it's unconscious, but is it also strategic? I know you want to be inspirational and the Superman stuff. Is it also partially strategic? Like, hey, you know what? I really believe in this, and if I'm at the lead here, that's not a bad thing for me.
Gabe, actually, out of all of the things that we talked about, most of it is really unconscious. It's just second nature to me. But the leading thing actually is not. The leading thing is very strategic. Um, in that I came to a realization many years ago about the type of person eh, that I wanted to be in a professional atmosphere. And actually, it's weird. It was, you know, a lot of stuff you learn in your personal life you take into your professional life, right? About how you work, your relationship building, etc. I actually took this thing I learned through my professional career and kind of took it into my personal life over the years of being more of a leader than a follower, being a leader over being a manager. Like, there's a very big difference. Um, I I in a young part of my career, when I was first started out in the IT business, you know, IT is one of those careers where you kind of change positions quite often. Now, you know, I was fortunate enough to stay in. I've only had like 4 IT jobs, 5 if you include college, and had lengthy runs at all of them. But within those jobs, you know, you kind of change a lot. It's like one day you're handling desktop support, and then the next day you're handling server support, and the next day you're in operations. So you kind of shift around within an organization a lot. And I had a lot of different managers, and so many of them were were managers in this respect of, I'm going to tell you what to do. I am always in the right, and you're just going to do what I say, and you're going to do it first. And if you fail, well, I'm not going to take responsibility over your failure, even though I told you that's the right thing to do. Like, it always bothered me when somebody made a decision that I might not have believed in, but I listened to them because they're my manager, and then it would fail, and then they would kind of put the blame on me. And I had a realization at a certain point is I never wanted to be that person. I always wanted to be the person who who move, who's at, who moves forward, takes my team with me. If we make a mistake that based on a decision, you know, I made, then I learn, and everybody else hopefully learns around me. I also always like to show people that I lean on